Hello, and welcome to All the Grief, a regular podcast for all those who have been touched by grief. We are your hosts. I am Rebecca Luttrell.
And I am Andrea Giron Mathern. We are two friends, a therapist, and a social scientist, both highly sensitive fellow grievers, here to share our hearts as we talk about all the grief. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, Andrea.
How is your heart this morning?
My heart is really joyful. I feel excited. I've been just thinking about we're getting married on Sunday, which is really exciting, and also a little jam-packed between now and then because, my girl has 4 plays in the next 3 days. But I'm also really excited to see her. She's the lead in Newsies. Jack Kelly, she'll be playing. It's like she's nervous, but she had this really cute moment the other day. She was telling me, like, she'll drop a line, like she'll forget a line, and then she'll just say something. She's taken enough improv that she just will play it off. And then so they were rehearsing, and her line, it's like Pulitzer, the newspaper guy, is like, "You've got a smart head on your shoulders." And then she's supposed to say deal, and he says deal. But she said what happened was she couldn't remember what she was supposed to say, even though it was one word. So she said, "You're an idiot." Then she said everyone laughed, and she's like, "So now I want that to be my line." And so I was like, okay. I was like, or you could just remember deal and just do it. I'm sure you'll drop enough lines because it's a lot of lines. But yeah, so I just feel like the next few days is going to be a lot and going to be really sweet. So I'm excited.
I love it. Those are all such
Yeah.
exciting things. Give Talia my love. I'm sorry we can't be at this show. We would have. The boys fell in love watching her on screen or on stage last time.
Yeah, I know. Something will align at some point.
It will.
So how's your heart? I know you're not at home. How's your heart this morning?
Yeah, my heart. So yeah, we are in New Mexico right now. I guessed we had on Larry Glover, who I met through a wilderness retreat. And his wife was also sort of base camp, so cooking and preparing meals for us on that retreat. And I fell in love with her. She's just like so wonderful. And where they have a cabin in New Mexico that is just about 12 minutes up the mountain from where my great-great-grandmother, great-grandmother, and my grandmother all lived on a mining camp. We're going to go explore this afternoon and kind of see where it was. And I have some old stories from my grandma, like in my pocket. But I'm feeling really tenderhearted. I mean, I think that's why.
Mm-hmm.
But this morning I was sitting on the porch and just listening they have a river that runs in front of their property, and listening to the bossy chipmunks and the birds. And Dottie came out and like wrapped me in a blanket, and I just lost it. I just was in tears. She just gave me a little kiss on the cheek and wrapped me in a blanket. And it was just she's not a mother, like by birthing anyone, but it was just such a loving, tender mothering act. And it just got me. I just cried for like 3 minutes. Clearly, I'm not done.
Oh, I love your heart. That sounds really, really beautiful and sweet.
It was very sweet.
Mm.
Well, I am excited. We have had this on our hearts to do this interview for quite a while. And even today, it is trying us to make sure that this happens. So my fingers are crossed that this all works out beautifully. This morning, we have Caroline. She is a wife, mother, storyteller, and story gatherer living in South Florida. Before her diagnosis with terminal cancer, she owned a small business teaching Thai massage and yoga. In 2022, Caroline learned she had the most aggressive form of brain cancer, glioblastoma, and was given the heart-rending decision of keeping her 22-week pregnancy with her second child or undergoing treatment. She chose her life for the sake of her first child. Thriving beyond her prognosis, Caroline shifted her focus to spending quality time with her family, devoting herself to healing, and advocating for patient care and reproductive rights. She shares her stories on her Substack, Sunny Side Up. Caroline also created an in-person storytelling event called Tampa Bay Storytelling, where she shares her story and offers others the opportunity to share theirs. In her own words, she's not here for silver linings, but to share the beauty of life before death. Recognizing that she has been a survivor all her life, she chooses to accept this chapter of her life with grace. Welcome to All the Grief, Caroline.
Thank you so much. And I've been looking forward to this for a while as well.
Mm.
So hopefully it
I
all
hope
works
so.
out.
How is your heart this morning?
It's been a very busy time, and I just hit my 4-year mark this
Mhm.
March. So you can call it the craniversary or whatever you want to call it, but I call it my renewal
Mhm.
period. So I just hit that, and now it's time for me to rest and relax and take it all in.
Mm.
It's a lot of
Of
processing this
course.
week.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting us be part of this really momentous week.
Yeah. We like to start out with our guest's grief origin story, which may not be the reason that you're on the podcast. It could be a memory from a time early in life where you first encountered something around grief, and it could be your current story that you're in, but it's sort of that moment that grief enters our life and sort of turns it upside down. So, what would you count as your grief origin story?
Yeah, yeah. So that's a really good question. And I feel like I caught on right away because my origin story goes so far back. I think I was always missing something that I needed. I was always grieving the things that we did not have. And, I grew up truly a survivor, with a wild way of being raised in Northeast Alabama and just always wishing that I had the love that I had for my mom most of the time. I wish I had it all
Mm.
the time. So I grew up in, very poor, struggling to be with one parent at a time, and they were divorced, and just always wanting to be with my mom, who was also quite manic and wasn't always there in the way she needed to be. So I feel like I grew up a survivor in itself, but always aching for that love that was sometimes
Hmm.
there, for something like that to always
Yeah.
be
Oh,
there.
that makes so much sense.
Yeah. That's so tender. And thank you, Caroline. I know Rebecca has also shared just the grief in being the child of divorced parents and how I remember she was sharing more about that part of her life in an interview. And it just really helped me reorient to the grief that children are experiencing when they're going back and forth and the way they're orienting to love and family and being in a child parent relationship and to have mental health on top of that. That's just so tender. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so we invited you on because I was in a women's group with you over the summer with our mutual friend, Lindsay Baumstein, who we've had on our podcast before. And the moment that we met, I think you were creating your first storytelling event and
Yeah.
was just so sort of blown away by so many aspects of your story. And so I always attempt on our podcast to go linearly, but then I end up being like, and then this, and then this, and then that. But it feels important to sort of catch our listeners up. So, sort of going back to this moment in 2022, which was 4 years ago,
Mhm.
you said you just hit this 4 year
Yeah.
mark. And at this point, you're pregnant. And I'm sure in the excitement of a second child, but you have some health things going on. So, can you kind of tell us about that moment? Because it's its own grief origin story.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I was about 17 weeks when I had my first symptom, which was I was going to text my friend a really insane, like crazy text, just the way that we work with our friends and tell them all the stuff they don't need to know. And I was going to text that, and everything I texted out was different words. I was so confused. I backspace and tried to do it again. It came out different
Hmm.
Mhm.
words. And I was like, okay, I'm just really tired. And that continued for about 5 days, and it was getting worse every day. And I quit texting. I started audio messaging people. I started noticing that there was like a slur
Mm-hmm.
in that. And that started on a Sunday. And by Friday, I was checking myself in with aphasia. And before that, it was just all joy and excitement. And I had just taken the first thump pick. So, but I never felt, I was like, oh, it's
Mhm.
pregnancy brain. But the Thursday before I went and checked in, I was teaching a Thai massage class at a local massage school. I crossed the bridge and there was about 30 students. And everything I was trying to say was coming out wrong. And then I wrote my own training book as
Uh-huh.
a teacher. Oh, I don't know why that's happening. I'm going to open up this book and read it. And I couldn't read
Mm.
my own book. So luckily, I could physically perform the Thai massage, and I was able to do that. But when I got in the car, I was like, something's wrong with me,
Mhm.
and I called my sister who's a nurse, and she's like, yeah,
Mhm.
this isn't right. And I came home and I Googled brain tumor while pregnant.
Wow. So you just, in that moment, had a hunch. Yeah. And
Hmm.
what did that yield, that search?
So my sister was like, oh, I think you should take an ambulance. And so I called an Uber. It's
It's
like, I'm not
cheaper.
paying for that. It's
Totally.
fine. So, I go and, I didn't believe myself. Women are not usually
Mhm.
believed. And so when I go in and check aphasia, even the man who was taking my deposit or my copay
Mm.
laughed at it. Aphasia. So then they took me back, we did a scan, and next thing I know, I have every neuro team at the
Ugh.
hospital running up to me like the neuro stroke, neuro
Mm.
surgery, the neuro emergency team. There's like four different ones, and they're all like arguing
Mm.
over what it could be. And when you're pregnant, you cannot get contrast for an MRI. So suddenly, this one student, like a resident, ran up to me and he was so excited. He's like, you have a mass like this big right on your language center. And I was like,
Uh,
yes, because I was like
Yeah.
validated.
yeah.
And then I had to sink in, like, what
Mm.
could that be? So it was actually like 3 to 4 weeks of time in and out of trying to get someone to come up with
Yeah.
what could
Mm.
it be without doing a surgery. And they thought, oh, if we do surgery, there could be too much coagulated blood to actually see anything because, they're like, it's just a bleeding something, bleeding mass. And so it was back and forth. And then finally it was go home and come back in a couple weeks. And we came home, and that was for about 5 days. I had gone to speech therapy, and I was trying to, like, I was hoping for
Mhm.
a stroke, and to even think that, I was like, "I could deal with that. I could deal with not sleeping
Mhm.
right for the rest of my life." And I started to learn how to sing because you can sing instead
Oh,
you
singing
can't.
is easier. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was singing everything I had to say, and then it finally came to one day where my husband was like,
Mm.
"Nope, you're not okay." Like, going back, and I fought for that so hard, and, I was so mad at him, and I gave him the silent treatment that was, like, the best thing I could because I could not. I was so angry, I was just like, and then we get in to find out it had grown, it had doubled in size,
Mm. Oh,
Wow.
shit.
and so that's when I had an emergency craniotomy,
Mm.
and it wasn't until so that began at 17, 18, almost 18 weeks. But I didn't have that emergency craniotomy until 19, 20 weeks.
Mhm. Mm.
And then, I woke up, my surgeon was I'm so lucky because the surgeon that was the emergency surgeon was brilliant and removed most of it. But, he didn't know when he was going in whether it was gonna be a stroke,
Right.
tumor, or just some sort of brain bleed.
Mm.
So when I woke up, that's when I got the
Mhm.
news that it was a tumor, but they wouldn't know which
Mhm.
one for another week or so
Ugh.
for that to come back. And so, yeah, we found out right at 20 weeks,
Yeah.
20, 21, what it actually was. And also knew as soon as they said tumor, I knew exactly which one it was going to
Yeah.
be.
You knew, and then you had to wait for them to
Mhm.
confirm. Yeah. And so it was glioblastoma, and then how do
Mhm.
they say, I know they don't stage, it's,
It's grade. It's a grade
yeah.
4. Yeah. So all of those are grade
Oh, all
4s.
glioblastomas are grade 4. Got it.
Yeah, you can have, like, a glioma grade 3 or a glioma grade 2 or a astrocytoma grade 2 or 3. But once you say glioblastoma, that is grade
Got
4.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those of us, there's
Whew.
just a couple of things. Yeah, I mean, whew, what a journey in just a short period of weeks. But for those of us who don't are just not as familiar with the grades and even some of the language, when you said aphasia, what does that mean? And how did you know to check that? Was that your sister?
No, you look at a board and it's got just these lists of things, and I'm like, I'm looking at this, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm gonna
Uh-huh.
check. But it said aphasia/confusion.
Oh,
Mm.
And I was like, I guess that's the only one that applies
okay.
right now. Like, I didn't see, like, stuttering or,
Yeah.
like, I was like, I guess that's the one,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and
Wow.
I had no idea what I was doing. I did try to go to work that morning, and I actually had a prenatal. My first client was a prenatal that I've been working with
Mm.
regularly. And I said, "Do you get really bad pregnancy brain? Do you get that?" And she was like, "Yeah, I forget my keys all the time." And I was like, "This is not the same.
I forgot
This is
how to
not the
read. My
same." Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had to it was like a very as a woman who has been, I mean, repeatedly called a hypochondriac,
Mm.
Mm.
it's like, you're like, "Okay, I'm not gonna make a big deal out of it."
Yeah. Ah. I wanna go on a tangent about that. Yeah, I mean, it's so that feels just I don't know, I'm like, "Okay, let me insert this little PSA. Can we please stop telling people that what they're feeling or saying is, like, untrue and kind of putting it under some umbrella of untruth?" Because I have a good friend who died this summer, and their whole life they were called a hypochondriac, and their mom even kept, like,
Mhm.
a list on the refrigerator of all the things that they said they were sick with, and one of the sweetest things that ever happened in my friend's life was when their partner, um, said, "I believe you." When
Mm.
they said
Mhm.
something, and I'm just like, that means so much to just believe a person because that idea of
Mhm.
me talking about what's bothering me is dismissible, then we internalize, "Well, I'm gonna dismiss it and not talk about what's happening," and then it's
Mhm.
as serious as it gets, and you're like, "Oh, I'm probably over exaggerating, so I don't wanna make a big deal about, like, is this pregnancy brain?" And instead of like, yeah, something feels really off and I'm going to trust that. I mean, it feels like both were happening. Like you were like, I don't want to be a hypochondriac, but also I didn't just forget my keys.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
Oof.
I wanna echo that, and also just, like, particularly, like, women and pregnancies, and it's such an intimate time with our own bodies where we're sort of, like, if anything, more in tune with what's happening in our bodies on another level, and yet so often when women have something, like, are experiencing something that they know is more extreme than even what's happening as they're creating another human inside of them. It's so dismissed, even by medical professionals. And we sort of hear this, like, all the way back to like Serena Williams, who had a stroke, who had clots and had to insist on being seen, and it saved her life. And how many women for whom are not believed and are sort of written off as just kind of at the lightest, worry warts because it's their first pregnancy or whatever, but at most of being accused of being a hypochondriac. So I'm glad you inserted that PSA, Rebecca. And yeah, to be able to go back and just hold that Caroline's hand and just honor how much she knew about what was happening in every step of that. So
Hmm.
now we're at this grade 4. So can you talk to us a little bit, especially when we've really been oriented, I think, in the world to stage whatever cancer? What does that grade 4 diagnosis mean?
Yeah, so I had previously had a client that she was diagnosed with glioblastoma at
Mm,
29,
mm,
and she was my neighbor, and she started coming to see me every week of her life that was left, and so that's how I just kind of had this inkling that it was the same thing. I think having that experience with her typically, this is a very, very aggressive tumor and one of the most lesser knowns and least funded. But typically, your prognosis will be 6 months to
Mm.
18
Wow.
months. The 5 year survival prognosis statistically is 5%. So I already knew all that. No one had to explain that to me because I had worked with this woman all the weeks that she had left back in 2014. And I knew that she had survived 2 years almost. It was really, really tough. And I was like, this is
Mhm.
it.
Mm.
So,
Yeah. And then it feels like there's this other piece where you're pregnant and you know that this is what's happening. And at any point during this process before the doctors started telling you this is what your choices are, were you starting to feel
mhm.
aware of what your choices were? And
Yeah. So before they told me the grade, they came in because, it's sent off for biopsy. They can't tell me exactly the type or, they said it looks
Mhm.
like it could be, a glioma. And I was like, oh,
Mhm.
that's really bad. She said, with a grade two, if it's a grade two,
Mhm.
you can keep your pregnancy
Mm.
and you can have
Mhm.
several years with a grade two. And I said, okay. I said, "But what if it's a grade
Mhm.
3 or a grade 4?" And she said, "We throw the kitchen sink at it." And I was like, "Okay." But I
Mhm.
just knew it. And then, yeah, they wouldn't even tell us over the phone when it did come in. We called begging for them to tell us over the phone so that we
Mhm.
could get through the weekend. And they said, "No, come in on Monday." And I knew it was going to be the whole center, and, it's also being with my
Yeah.
partner and navigating his emotions and his feelings. And I was don't get me wrong, I was having moments of, you just like, you wake up, you realize it's not a dream, and
Mhm.
you just scream into the room, like yell. But then there were so many moments I was just calm, calm,
Mm.
calm. Like, okay, this is what it is. We're gonna figure this out. And I'm very like this
Mhm.
because I'm the survivor. Pretty much lived in that fight or flight my whole life. Having to navigate this amount of loss with my partner was
Yeah.
just a whole nother experience. And so when they did present us with everything and they said, they didn't want to say abortion,
Yeah.
but they wanted you to know that you needed it.
Mm.
They didn't want to say like what you had to do for you. The radiation said there won't be a single person in Florida that will
Mhm.
radiate you while you're pregnant. But this guy just got out the majority of it. And before it grows back, you definitely need radiation.
Mhm.
And you can't do either of those if you're pregnant. And since you just had this craniotomy, we typically start the radiation 4 to 6 weeks out because mine was so aggressive and
Mm.
bleeding and the hormones were driving that. They wanted to start radiation even sooner. So I tried to go see a maternal medicine
Mhm.
doctor. I went to my previously scheduled 20-week scan and talked to the MFM who sent me to a different, cancer center who then told me, "Oh, we can't treat you because you're pregnant." It was just this whole roundabout. And I ended up from that other cancer center,
Mm.
passed out again. And I was, being ambulanced back to my original hospital. And then my surgeon came in and he was like, "I can't do
Mhm.
like, what I did is amazing." And he got me my speech back and, like, I came out with very minimal deficits. He was like, "You have a daughter at home. You have your husband. I
Mhm.
cannot do that again. And this is the time that you need." And I
Mm.
was like, "Thank you for just," because I knew what I needed to do, but I needed someone to say, "This is what you need to
Yeah.
do." And say instead of sitting there like,
Talking around it.
yeah, like, "If you don't do this, then I will hold your hand through it, but
Mhm.
these hormones are making this," and it's bleeding, so it's a totally
Yeah.
different, kind of tumor because it's like, so as soon as he, like, helped me in that, and I said, "Okay, let's do it." And it was so fast. I mean, everything was so fast. So it was pretty much the next day they were getting that scheduled, and then the termination was 2 days for a D&E, and, so it was all days, or a few hours on Sunday, a few hours on Monday, and then, Monday night, I got home from surgery around 6 p.m., and Tuesday morning, I had to be
Mm,
fitted for my radiation mask at 7.
Oh,
Like, that's how fast.
yeah. And how were you moving emotionally through that? Because that's a lot.
It's just fight or flight, and I was on corticosteroids that are making me like, I'm not able to sleep because they're just, like, taking that energy inside of my chest and just, like,
Mhm.
making things get done instead of processing, I'm like, "Okay, I gotta schedule this, I gotta call these people," and I was trying to call, a better brain center, Duke, and get in with a different place in a different state, and so all of that was pushed aside for this other grief of being
Yeah.
terminally diagnosed and understanding that my life is also going. Yeah.
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, oof. Yeah, I'm just sitting with
Yeah.
all of this, as someone, like you said, 4 years, right? We just this week was 4.
Mhm.
But in that moment of just like any one of these things could just wash over you as the just incredibly overwhelming, but to have it all, and as you were talking about the medical professionals before your surgeon, sort of putting this entire decision on your lap in a way that just feels so unfair. Well, completely, it is your decision, but in this way that just felt so unfair. And so I'm so glad that that
Yeah.
surgeon came in and just said, like, I know there are so many ways that the bureaucracy of medicine and insurance allowed medical professionals to say or not say things. And in the height of particularly sensitive things, both like emotionally and politically, as having to terminate a pregnancy. I'm just so glad that that surgeon found a way to walk that line in a way that gave you clarity that you needed so that you could make the most informed
Yes.
decision with the most clear information that they could give you rather than seeing like, I'm holding this nebulous ball and I'm supposed to make a decision out of this. It's just so unfair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am lucky that this was actually during my before on the second day before they took me in for the surgery. I said to my husband, I said, this was 1 month, about 1 month before the doc's decision.
Mm,
And I said, oh, aren't we so lucky that we live in a state that will do this? Because otherwise I would not be able to get this done anywhere else because I'm at 21 weeks and I can't fly. I'm in the ICU. My brain
Mm,
has just been cut open. And the nearest state, if we were to drive, would be what, like Virginia? I was like thinking about all of this, not even understanding that that was about to
right.
happen with the doc's decision. And so, I mean, it's just like at one moment, my
Mm,
whole world came down. But right before I went into surgery, I remember looking where we live. We have
mhm.
Bayshore, which is like the longest street where everybody is working out and running and
mhm.
walking all the time. And I'm looking out there and all these people are moving. And I said, if I do this decision, I'm going to be a 5 year survivor. And I just remember seeing those people and they're walking and they're moving. And I was like, I'm going to get up, I'm going to move again. And I'm going to be a 5 year survivor if I
Mhm.
make this decision. And I hope
Yeah.
so.
You're
But
on track. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you're talking about this, at the risk of saying too many PSAs in one episode. So I had cancer, maybe 15 years ago, and it was a highly treatable cancer, but it was stage 4. It was staged to stage 4. They had done chemotherapy and it hadn't they weren't sure that the tumor was completely dead. And they were like, we're finding dying lymphocytes, but we're not sure there aren't some that are living. And so we recommend radiation, but like, it's up to you. And it was like they didn't definitively want to say do radiation. And so they brought it to the board and everyone was like, I mean, I would probably do it if it was me and that, but there were all of these side effects. So it was sort of like, we think if we do radiation, we'll get rid of this cancer. And then we have just increased your risk for future cancers. And I just remember collapsing on my kitchen floor, screaming, like, I just want someone to tell me what to do. I don't know. This feels like a
Yeah.
false decision. Like it feels so hard. And there is something really comforting when someone can just step in with authority. I mean, for me, it was like a friend coming in and going, hey, okay, let's look at this, and just having this like, it's like, okay, now you said that. That made sense. I am going to show up to radiation. You're right. Like I don't know what's to come, but I want like the life I'm in right now. And so it feels like that doctor was able to offer, that surgeon was able to offer you that and just say, look, this is the life you're
Yeah.
in, and you can have more of this life you're in, but these are the choices you have to make within that. But
Hmm.
it's just like
Yeah.
we're not supposed to make these decisions alone. They're horrible decisions,
Yeah.
and so much unknown.
Yeah.
I wanted to have more kids, and everybody was like, yeah, it's possible. Yeah, I had a very difficult pregnancy and, well, birth. The pregnancy was fine. And finally, my midwife, they wouldn't answer me. And my midwife, I said, what would you tell me if I was your daughter? And she just like took a deep breath. And I could tell it was a moment where she's like, I'm not supposed to answer this. But I'm like in my soul begging her, like, I need somebody to help me because I want this in my heart. And she just looked at me and she said, I would tell my daughter, you have two healthy babies and they deserve a mom who's going to live a long life. And I knew that meant if I get pregnant, I will probably die during childbirth. I just knew and I needed that. And so I just want to thank like the healthcare providers that just inch their toe over that line enough that gives us information that we need because it's hard in that moment for your heart to want something or to be confused or to be like on steroids and not sleeping and having just had brain surgery. I mean, like that's an extreme. So I just want to thank the ones who just bravely put their toe over the line to give someone the
Hmm.
lifeline they need to be able to make a clearer decision. And it's still yours. You could have gotten that information and still said no, but you would have had the information.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, as I'm watching time, I'm just like, what the hell? How are we going to get through all of this? I have so much I want to talk about. So, you know that you're doing treatment. You have just an internal resolve around, okay, I'm going to be the 5%. I'm going to get to this 5-year mark at least, could be 10. That's what I hate about statistics. It's
Yeah.
like, it feels like so much of your life and sort of this turning point in your life and orienting around death and like a terminal diagnosis. Okay, I will get to be here longer for my daughter and my husband. And
Hmm.
this is what I will likely die from. And these are where the statistics are around that. And so how do you start orienting to your life in that space? Yeah. Like was that like this major revelation? Was it something where you pulled on resources from the past? Like how did you start to relate?
Yeah. So this is like the flood of grief that comes in when I do come home and, I am starting this treatment. Well, some people don't get through radiation
Mm-hmm.
the way that I did. And that was 30
Mm.
treatments to my brain, Monday through Friday for 6 weeks, 7:40 every morning. And so there was this, okay, gotta hurry, gotta hurry and get all these things done while it's still intact in case I can't speak again afterwards or I can't see again afterwards. Which is, sometimes a thing. And so it was, recording my
Mm.
voice into objects and teddy bears and frames, picture frames, just recording in general, making videos. But then there is like the stuff that you really gotta do. You gotta get in and meet a lawyer. You gotta go and talk to palliative care and square everything away with your wishes. Did have to I wanted to go find a green burial. And so we went and visited there, picked out, you know, a place and, started planning like
Mm-hmm.
the after
Mhm.
while trying to live fully in the in between. Yeah, it was really hard to process any of the grief still, but I'm seeing like I was in the same spot for about 10 years. I didn't even get to clear out my own
Mm.
office. my friends went over and did it for me because I didn't have any space to do that. I mean, I
Mhm.
grieve
Yeah.
that all the time, and all the clients that I saw on a daily basis. And so it was just keep moving one day at a
Mhm.
time, keep moving one day at a time. And I felt like in that there was also this, like, if you take life one day at a time, it is the longest day of your life every day, because if you expect, okay, anything can happen today, how is that gonna make my day? I'm gonna make it the best it possibly can be, and I'm gonna, like,
Mhm.
put down the phone and pay attention to every little word or
Mhm.
sparkle or glimmer or whatever it is. And so between, the things going through with chemo and radiation and just so much fatigue, I was able to every day intentionally get out, go for a walk. And it's just like your mind is
Mhm.
focused on what really matters.
Mm.
And I would hear people saying, well, aren't you going to go do a bucket list and all that?
Mhm.
I'm like, this is it. I don't need to travel anywhere else, and
Mm.
this is
Yeah.
it.
I think that in between is so important. And I think it's so like easy to see in your experience, right? It reminds me of when Rebecca's friend was dying and everybody was like, write your will, you're dying. And they were like, you're dying too. We're all dying. But in that moment where like you're faced with your mortality on much more of like you're given a timeline where the rest of us are just fucking like assuming. But it was just reminding me of like we're all actually in that in between. It came up because I was driving with the boys and they were reading in the back seat. So I was listening to my music and I was listening to the Foo Fighters, like this sort of like random mix. And one song would be about like, when I'm gone, I'm going to be the sky that you can hang your stars on, like just these beautiful poetic, like, and then the next song was like, I never want to die, like him rocking out screaming, I never want to die. I don't want to go. And
Mhm.
I was thinking of that as you were talking, like, you're having to hold, like, if I go or when I go, I mean, we're all going.
Mhm.
When I go, here's how I'm taking care of it.
We are.
And I'm gonna fucking hope and fight my hardest to stay here because I don't want to go today. Or like Darnell, another guest said, like, it would be really inconvenient for me to die right now. I
Mhm.
have a lot of things ahead of me. And
Yeah.
so I just like, it's just
Yeah.
this continued invitation of like, we all are holding that. We just, most of us, most of the time can pretend we don't have an expiration date.
Yes. Yes. And originally the prognosis was with treatment one
Oh,
year. And I was rushing. At first I was just rushing to get all the things done. And I wanted to write a book. I wrote a book,
Mm.
in between treatments and everything. And I realized, wait, this book ain't
Mhm.
over, and
yeah.
I'm gonna keep writing in the book. But I also wanted to be the source to tell my people, you need to go do this too.
Right.
Yes.
Go take care of your stuff.
Do they listen?
Yeah.
No,
Our people don't listen either.
No. We're like, "Listen to episode blah, 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 listen to episode," and everyone's like, "Later."
no one wants to pay attention.
No.
No.
Yeah, people are scared and somehow think that they're gonna draw something in, and it's sort of like having your story as an example, it's like preparing for everything really quickly in that first year didn't mean, "Okay, and now you're ready, and now it's like, you're at a 4-year mark. It didn't hurt anything to do that, and people just
Mm-mm.
sort of live in this superstition, like, if I don't acknowledge that I am mortal, I will be immortal, It's like, no, it doesn't work like that, and you're not drawing anything
Mhm.
in, but you're not pushing anything away. Just do it.
Mhm.
But I think also people are
Mhm.
afraid to feel sad, and I think there's something about when you think about,
Mhm.
"Oh, I actually leave." Yeah, it's always
Mhm.
inconvenient.
It's
Mhm.
sad.
And it's sad.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this time, you're also trying to capture, like you said, between treatments, capture your story and write a book, and clearly starting to weave the story of, I'm sure, the entirety of your life's journey, but also capture the story of this diagnosis and process towards preserving as much of your life as you can. How did storytelling become part of your process? Were you a writer before, and how has it sort of played out in these last 4 years?
Yeah, so it's funny because, I mean, growing up in the South, we are all storytellers.
Mm,
And especially where I'm from, it's like deep South, I grew up without TV and stuff like that. You just sit around and tell stories all the time. And that's just,
Mm,
part of how we live. And so I think it's a natural thing within me. But I was also, if there could have been anything that I could do, I've always wanted to write a book. I've
mhm,
always wished that I had the time to write a book. And then finally, I got my time. And I also, because I was posted on the news a few times and I went into work with Planned Parenthood Florida and a couple other companies, Abortion in America, Free and Just. Those I was a storyteller, like labeled as a storyteller for the media and
mm,
for coverage of what was happening with the dog's decision and everything else. So I was telling my story over and over and over again. It became an ad for, the Yes on 4 campaign in Florida and understanding that stories save lives.
mhm,
And telling our stories, it's healing. Every time I told my story, it healed me. Every time
mm,
recognizing that I could save someone else with the abortion in America, but also with glioblastoma, like
mhm,
making this diagnosis not so crazy unheard of and like bringing it to light like this is happening. They're changing, the age that we're being diagnosed,
mm,
mm,
as we speak. And so I started noticing how much I healed through that and how much other people were healing through that. And so that's when I was in group in the circle and I was like, I wish we had a host here in Tampa that we could just tell stories, share whatever's on our hearts, in a safe space and be in community because my I started noticing, in these communities, they're small. They're
mhm.
small and a lot of my communities were online or long distance or whatever it is because, the deaf positive community is
mhm,
small.
Mhm.
And, you know, so I felt so lonely and I was like, oh, and then that's when Lindsay said, "Oh, I feel like you could do this." I feel like you could do this, and I was like, "No, not me." And then I was like, "Fine, I'm gonna do a storytelling event 100 days from now." And I asked, Google, what's 100 days from now? And it was a Thursday, and I said, "I'm gonna find the most community supporting place in my neighborhood, and we'll go there."
Mm,
And now we've had 3 events.
that's
wow.
so beautiful.
It's been all sorts of stories, just, like, funny.
Mhm,
We've had a lot of grief. We've had a lot of, laughter. My friend serenaded me with a song last time.
mhm,
She, sang some Joni Mitchell.
mhm,
Because she was talking about how she joined, a group, to sing. And
mhm,
so it's just been my favorite part is that people are leaving with a sense of what other people are going through,
Mm,
mhm,
and they're leaving with new connections.
mhm.
And just watching everyone change numbers and, follow what I'm doing and getting away from like social media and into socialization.
yeah.
Yes. Yes, and going back to I mean, I think our origin is as storytellers, and like you were talking about,
Yeah.
in your childhood, that being such a huge part of your life and your community outside of it's like we didn't have a television. I mean, that there wasn't an option, and there's a way I was reading something recently that was talking about how there are movies that we watch that are really well told stories or series that we find that are really interesting and well told stories, but that the majority of things are terrible stories and they don't move us forward in our thinking or in our, relationship to the world, and how I do think that storytelling done well saves lives, creates relationship, creates validation for our experiences, gives us voice, and so it's such a beautiful invitation to kind of be like, let's bring this back into storytelling and community with other humans. And then how do we leave feeling we learned something, we felt something, all of these pieces kind of coming alive in that process. You've done 3 events. I think you said you had one more on the.
The next one's in May, the last Thursday of May.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
And your plan with your book, I know you're like, I love that you're just going to keep writing it. And
Yeah, it's just for my daughter.
yeah,
Oh,
And I was just gonna publish it, and self-publish because that's always been a dream of mine. And then I just how crazy it is to try to publish your own book. And I was like, I don't need anything from anyone else. It's for her, and
yeah,
that's fine. And so, yeah, that's
we've met so many interesting people, and I feel like somewhere tucked away in my brain, and I will look for it, is someone who found a company that will publish like rather affordably, just like a one-off book. So if you just wanted to have one bound
okay.
for her, that could sit on her bookshelf,
Yeah,
I know
I
it's
would love
in my
that.
brain somewhere. I will spend some time thinking about it, and we'll get you that.
Yeah.
Well, Caroline, this has been such an amazing conversation. I'm so glad we travailed all of the
Yes.
technical difficulty and just started this conversation, which I
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
like your book, will continue. We'll just continue to talk.
Yeah. So glad that we can make this happen today. And
Hmm.
yeah, I would love to talk more because I could talk stories all
I
day.
love that. Well, so on the note of storytelling, I actually felt inspired for some reason. I was like, oh, I'm going to pull friends Willow Maley and Tracy Chalmers did this beautiful book this past year, The Grief Well, and it's grief stories, exploring the narratives we hold about loss. And it's sort of like this journal that people can go through on their own. I think maybe they run some groups around it. It's an amazing book. And we got like one of their not for resale pre-release copies. So at this point I was like, I don't even know if I'm like actually quoting the book. I need to get the actual one. But there was this piece in it. I was just sort of flipping through it and I was like, oh, this feels so relevant to today. And it was this quote from a woman, Sharon Blackie, and it said, because stories are spells, they change things. When they hook us and reel us into their magic, they change us. It's stories that will save us in the end.
Mhm.
Not just the stories we read or tell or the stories we want to be in, but the ones that live inside of us and the ones we live inside. The stories we invite in, those that we choose to inhabit. And then they kind of had like this series of prompts about because stories are spells. And I was like,
I love that.
I mean, you tell me something's a
Yeah.
spell,
Yes.
I'm all
I
about
love
it.
that.
Yeah. And so I kind of like crafted a question from sort of looking at what their prompts were and thinking about what we were going to be talking about today. The question that I have for us as we close today is, what is a story of grief or death that cast a spell on you
Oh,
at some point in your life? And Andrea, when you're ready.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's so interesting to try to think of something quickly. But the first thing that came to mind was when I was a little girl. So Linda Ronstadt was like one of my mom's favorite singers, and she released an album and she sang the whole album in Spanish. And it was like the 80s. So this was like a big deal because she was already a very popular musician. And then she did this TV special where it was like an opera performance of these songs. And there was this piece called De Gallina, and it was about this young woman. And she was like locked in this tower. It's this awful story. And my family was always like, why are you so obsessed with this? I would like memorize it and I would say the lines at the kitchen table. And really, like when you were asking this question, this kept popping up. It was like, for me, it was like this young woman who just wanted to be herself. She wanted to marry the person that she loved. She was a dancer. She wanted to dance, and she was locked in a tower. And in the moments before she died, they realized she was going to die and they let her out, and she she died. And then everybody, of course, regretted how they treated her. And so I don't even feel like I need to analyze it, but that was the one that came up for me. It was the gallina, and this will not surprise if my sister's listening. She'll be like, "Of course she picked that because my sister knows every line from that mini opera." That was mine.
I love that. That's so sweet. I think first thought is best thought. I don't like giving people too much time to think about these
Yeah, I
things.
love that.
Caroline, how about you? What was a spell that was cast on you?
The first thing that comes to my mind is my mom actually was pregnant with her second or her first baby, and she they lost her on the table during birth. And
Your mom?
yes, she saw the light, and they had to revive her. They shocked her back to life. Her baby was stillborn,
Mm-hmm.
and that was supposed to be my brother. And this was on Good Friday,
Mm,
1983.
mm,
And she left the hospital Easter Sunday, 1983,
mm-hmm.
no, with no baby.
Mm,
And then Good Friday, 1984, she had me.
mm.
Oh my God.
And on Easter Sunday, 1984, we went home.
Ah,
What a spell, right?
What a spell.
yeah, that's an enchanted. Like you came in on a spell. You entered life on a spell. What a story.
Ugh,
Wow. Thank you,
thank you. Wow,
Caroline.
that's beautiful. Well, Rebecca, what was yours?
It's funny because I had the most time to think of an answer. And I thought I was going to tell one particular story, but as you were telling your stories, I suddenly flashed on an even earlier memory. So I used to stay by my mom's sister, my aunt, I was pretty convinced my actual mother, she's not, but I was pretty convinced in my early childhood. I was like, oh, she was supposed to be my mom, but she was like, not ready. And so she just gave me to my mom. Like she felt more like a match to me in personality and everything. But I would stay at her house often. And it was just an invitation. It was never a thing anyone had read to me. She had the Velveteen Rabbit on the nightstand, and I
No.
would read it all the time. And that story cast a spell on me because it was this story that set me up around what your lovability actually is and what happens in your life.
Mhm.
Like, it's not about being beautiful or being performative. It was like when you're really, really loved, all of your fur has been loved off, all of and it was like this idea it had like impermanence in it. It had, aging and mortality, and like there was just so much in it. And I'm like, 6 or something, just reading this book
Uh,
over and over again. And I was like, there's some truth about life in here that no one's talking to me about, but it was like casting a spell on me. And so I've always loved that story. Yeah.
oh, I love it.
Yeah, that's a good
I
one.
love it. Caroline, thank you so much. What a beautiful conversation. And truly, we
Thank
will
you.
get back onto our calendars and seeing when we can get you back because this is not done.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So beautiful to see
Beautiful.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of All the Grief. You can find us on Instagram at All the Grief Pod. And please take a moment to rate our podcast and share us with your friends. We'd love to keep expanding our reach to all the people who could benefit from conversations on grief. Take care.